Hello everyone, welcome to part 6 of this series. In this episode we are going to set up horse riding. I'm using Horse Animset Pro in combination with Game Creator for this, as this was a much requested topic. Riding horses is obviously a must for games like these, and this is honestly an absolutely wonderful asset. Before we start, I would like to thank all of my Patreon supporters for the amazing support. This scene will be made available on Patreon as it gets updated. So we are back in our lovely scene, and today we're going to set up horse riding. So what I'll be using for this is the really popular Horse Animset Pro asset. It basically is a animal controller, and the nice thing about it is that it's actually an animal controller, so not just for horse riding, but you're actually controlling the animal, which is pretty cool. Loads of things can be done with this. You can change it to dragons and all sorts, so it's a really cool asset. In order to make sure it fits our style, I also use this cheap Polygon asset so that it matches the Polygon assets we have in the fantasy bundle. And a quick reminder on that as well is that it's the last day of the fantasy bundle on sale. So if you don't have it yet and are interested, keep that in mind. It's the last day, and honestly it's a terrific package. You just honestly get so much for the amount of money, so I would definitely recommend this. Anyway, back to our scene. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to Polygon Horse Demo and pick the Sinti Horse HAP scene, and here we have the Sinti version of the horse. Now this already has all of the Horse Animset Pro scripts attached to it because the requirement is that you have Horse Animset Pro. So I'm simply going to copy this one over, and we're going back to our own scene. There we go, and we're going to paste this in. Now let's try to find where it is. There we go. And I'm going to drag it near the cards, etc. Seems like a good spot. And there we go. Now the horse itself is already fully set up. You don't really need to do anything. It's all done. We just need to make sure that it's not controllable. So we're going to disable Malware's input, which are the controls. Now the important thing here is that these controls, I mean, they don't have to, obviously, but I would in general make sure that the controls match the same controls you are using for your normal player. That way it feels intuitive and it's not something you'll need like a pop-up screen to actually, explain what the controls are. You could obviously do that and completely change the controls. That's completely up to you, but I think it's, actually pretty nice to match the controls here. So, but yeah, that's just a personal opinion, obviously. So when we look at our player, and I'm pretty sure it's here. So player input for jump is still set to space. That's something we'll address in a bit later as well. But by default, the same will be used for the horse. Movement keys are exactly the same as well. So that's a nice thing here. By default, it all is exactly the same. So that's pretty cool. Now what we're going to do is our player is going to get a new set of actions. So we have equip, we have combat, we have movement, and now we are going to add horse riding. So let's create an empty. Just drag it here and let's call this horse riding. There we go. I'm actually going to drag it above this as well. And this horse riding is obviously going to get a set of actions, but before we get there, we're first going to set up the horse itself. Now, it's nothing to add in terms of controls, but we just need to make sure that some things are added in order for this to look pretty smooth. So First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a marker. And the reason for this marker is this marker basically positions the player in the right spot. As I've obviously already set this up before, I am going to cheat a bit and enter these coordinates in order for this to work well. So I would definitely just copy this over, as these are settings that just work fine. And the nice thing here is that, you know, even if we move the horse, the marker will still be the same. So that will go along just well. And I'm going to do a second marker. There we go. And this one is a weird one. It's not something you'd expect, in all honesty. It's one of those workaround things that we need. So I'll explain a bit later when we're actually setting up these actions. But for now, just follow along, enter these coordinates, and yeah, that will work. Cool. So that's it for these markers. So we've got that all set up. Now the next thing we're going to add to the horse is a trigger. So let me just create an empty. I'll actually drag these in as well. And let's rename this to mount trigger, something like that. So player enter, and yeah, we need I'm gonna use a box glider for this one. There we go. Let's move this one up. Oh. And the box collider is basically going to be the area where we stand if we want to mount the horse. Always have a bit of difficulty finding the right spot for these things. There we go. Let's drag this up a bit. Perfect. So this is going to be our mount area. So this is where we'll be able to mount the horse. So it needs to be a trigger as well, keep in mind. And on player enter, and another trigger on player exit as well. I'm not going to add those actions just yet, as we'll just copy this over. So this is going to be a really simple one. Set active, and this will be player horse riding. So yeah, as you might have guessed, we'll turn that off by default. I'm going to just duplicate these actions and drag in this one. And here we are going to disable horse riding. So the moment we exit that zone, we won't be able to use horse riding. Now, one other thing I'm going to activate as well, so let's just duplicate these. Should have obviously done this from the start, but in our HUD, the interactor, I think this is called pickup. I'm going to duplicate that one and rename it to mount. And we're going to change this text to mount. There we go. So if you remember this, this is what we use to pick up the sword. It's a small interactor. And I simply duplicated that and changed the text to mount instead of pickup. And that's the one we're going to activate as well. Just copy over this action paste it in and turn it off. So there's already mount triggers here, but yeah, that's not something we're using. So maybe give a bit of an appropriate name. Mount trigger game creator. There we go. Now we can go back to our horse riding. So we have a trigger, and I'm going to use the same button here as picking up the sword. It's also going to be a hold on timeout, and it's going to be keep at 6. And we're going to call in some conditions, obviously, as this is not going to be the most straightforward set of actions. It's actually quite a lot to it. So next thing what we need to do is we go to preferences and we add a global variable. Now we've done this before, but if you don't remember how to do this, press the little plus, change this to the text you want, so writing for example, and this needs to be a bool, and that's it. Change this to everything and we're done. So yeah, make sure you set that up. So I'm just going to use the bool called horse riding, and when we go to our conditions here, we're going to add a clause, and the clause is simply going to be tied to that global variable. So I'm going to keep it like this. So this is the set of actions. I'm only going to create one right now because we are going to duplicate this one and drag the duplicate in here and make a couple of small changes. Just a lot faster than doing them all from scratch because they are pretty much the same actions, and this is going to be a long list. So let's do a move character first. So our player is going to move to the marker we created, and that's the first one. So this is where he's going to move to. Wait until arrives has to be on, just make sure you have that. Then we are going to use character mount. So he's going to go into mounted mode, which basically means you can't control him anymore, which is the point because we are going to be controlling the horse instead of the player. Then we are going to do a state change. Now this is something we're going to set up. I'll do that in a bit. For now, let's just skip it, and that's going to be the animation work. I'm going to add a small weight, just of 0.1, just to make sure this all goes through before we continue. Then we are going to enable a component, and we're going to drag in our horse here, and the component is called Melber's input. So we're going to include Melber's input. There we go. That's going to be turned on. So we're turning off the character controller for game creator, and we're turning on the character controller for the horse. Then we're going to add a transform. So our player needs a new parent, and this parent is actually an interesting parent. So we are going to use something that is included here so that we have these mount points, and this is actually the best thing to use, and it's maybe that's what the default controller uses as well, but it's actually really cool. Keeps the player in place correctly, but also makes him move along with the horse movement. It's actually a really, let's just say I'm glad that was actually there, because using the saddle or the horse itself just didn't work properly. So yeah, that's the one we're going to use, so really nice. Then we are going to add a new camera controller. Let's just do that straight away. So I'm going to duplicate this one. we're going to use the horse as a target, and let me change this offset to 2. In the intro I just kept it the same, but maybe this is slightly better. And you can play around with these settings and do whatever you think looks nice. I'm just going to keep it like this, and let's call this character motor horse. There we go. So we're going to drag that in. So let's add the camera, change camera, and we're going to change to the horse. And let's add a transition time of 0.5, just to give that little smooth effect. Then I'm going to copy this one, and what we're going to do here is on the player we are going to disable the character controller. Now if you don't do this, he will move with the parent, which is the new parent, which is the horse, but he won't do it in the correct way. So he'll still move around and drag around. Not something we want. And then one of the weird ones, which took some experimenting to find out, is we need to turn off foot IK, otherwise we get a really strange effect. So yeah, keep that in mind. That's something that needs to be turned off as well. Then we are going to add another small weight of 0.5 just to make sure all of this had time to process. Because if we don't add a weight, all of those actions would happen at the same time, and we don't want that, so that's why it needs a small weight. And then after those are done, we're going to change the variable bull. So horse riding, that's going to be turned on because now we are horse riding. And then another interesting one is going to be head track. And that's for our player. This needs to be 0.01, I think. Not entirely sure anymore, so that might be interesting. And we're going to drag in the second marker. Now the reason for this is because by default his head will be looking this way. So in this way. And the reason for that is because the animations are not actually changing the player position, they are just animations. So once we get to the animations, I'll explain a bit better, but basically he'll be looking to the left, and well, that's the impression we have, that the character is looking to the left. Well, in reality that is actually still the front, because as you can see we're mounting from the front here, and the player doesn't actually rotate, he just, well, it's all animation work. So this small little thing allows him to look this way, that way it all looks normal and, you know, looks good. So that's a long set of actions, I know. So now we're going to duplicate this one and drag it in here. And here we are going to move around a couple of things, because the order in which all of this takes place is actually really important. If you don't have the correct order, things will, well, just look weird. So we're going to start off with the camera. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to switch that back to the original one. There we go. So we're changing the camera back. We're also going to immediately stop the head tracking. So untrack. Then next up we are going to make sure we clear the parent. So change parent is the default. We're going to clear the parent so he no longer has a different parent. Then at the same time we are also making sure that we can no longer control the horse. And keep in mind, because there's no weight here, all of these will be executed at exactly the same time. So the order of this matters a bit less, but the order, well, basically whenever there is a weight, that order definitely does matter. So next up we are going to make sure our character controller is functional again. So we're going to turn that back on. And then last thing will be our reset of our player state. So we're going to reset that back to normal. And I know we haven't set it yet, we're definitely going to do that in a bit. And then we are adding a wait. And this is going to be a 2-second wait. Might reduce that in a bit, but you know, we need to make sure it has time to finish those animations. So maybe 2 seconds is actually a bit too much. I'm going to try 1. See if that works, otherwise we'll change it back. We're going to remove the move player to marker. That's not something we're going to do anymore. We're going to enable foot IK again. And if that's something you're not using at all, then great, you don't have to do that. We're going to add a weight of 0.5. Horse riding is going to be turned off again. And we are no longer going to be in mounted mode, so we can control our player again. So whole set of actions, but before we can actually try this, we need to make sure we have an animation state. Now you can just drag in existing animations, but I'm actually going to use Game Creator's states because it's slightly easier in this one. So I have it here, I think. Yeah, there we go. So let me create a new one. Right click, create, and this is going to be a simple state. There we go. And let's rename this to Mount Horse. And we are going to use a couple of animations that are provided by Horse Animset Pro. And I had to mess around with a lot of those settings of those animations. So instead of trying to remember what I did, I would just advise to honestly copy over those settings and they will work. That's just the easiest route. So we're going to go to this location. So Malware's animations, Horse Animset Pro, 2 animations, animations v2 rider. There we go. So we're going to use the mount and dismount. So here we have both of them. And yeah, here I would suggest making sure this is the same. So this is the mount. So make sure these settings are the same. And then hit apply if you needed to change anything. And with dismount, so this would be a time to press pause for a second. And then with dismount, these are going to be the settings. Now these for sure are different. I know that for a fact. So yeah, enter these settings, press pause for a second, and then hit apply once you're done. So this is definitely a bit strange, but yeah, that's because the animations basically rotate the player visually, but they're not literally rotating the player because Game Creator doesn't support root motion. And these are root motion animations. So that's why our player is not actually rotating. That's why our player was actually looking forward in this sense. And that's why we needed to adjust the head track. So these are root motion animations, and without doing root motion it wouldn't look that good. So, you know, these are a couple of the interesting changes we have to perform. So yeah. And then yeah, please make sure you apply these changes. So next up, let's actually add those to our state. So we're going to go to scenes. I should have definitely locked that, but that's okay. I'm going to go to scenes, and then I think I have it here. I'm going to lock this, so this will allow you to lock it in the inspector. We're going to go back to this set, and we're going to drag these in. So mount will be the character simple, and dismount is going to be the exit clip. Now you can play around with this and you can actually add mount to enter and then have a different type of idle on the original, which is something, you know, you can play around with it. I was actually quite happy with the way it looked by default, but if you want to get more creative and change idle states while you're on the horse, go ahead and, you know, play around with that. So just make sure you add that idle to here and the mount to enter. But yeah, for now I'm going to keep it like this, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to stay like that. I'm pretty happy with the outcome. So now that we have set that up, we're going to go back to our actions, unlock this one, and in our state we're going to look this one up. So I called it mount horse. There we go, mount horse. And yeah, that's it. That's literally all we have to do here. So going to hit play and see if I made any small mistakes, or if that, you know, changing those times was actually a good idea or not. So let's give this a go. So here we have our scene. Our horse is standing right there. Going to approach him. And as you can see right now, we have mount as an option. So I'm going to press 6 here. Oh, hold 6. Sorry about that. We're mounting a horse and we're riding the horse. So that's all working just fine. So no errors there. As you can see, because we set up that vegetation engine move with for the grass is also moving while we're riding the horse by default without changing anything. And that's because we made sure that we drag that motion volume low enough so that will always stick under the player. So that's why it's already moving by default with the horse as well. So pretty cool. Going to hold 6 again to dismount, and that doesn't really seem to be working. And let me have a look why that's not working. So on our player, which has now moved in the hierarchy, so let's actually inspect him because he has a different parent. So on our player we have horse riding is disabled because we left the area. That's actually pretty good to know. So there's a couple of ways to approach that and to fix that. So let's actually have a look. So one of the ways we could do this is actually going to be quite simple. On our player in the original actions, we are going to activate at the end of everything. We're going to activate horse riding again, just to make sure we can actually dismount. I'm going to copy that over, and we're going to make sure that is turning off at the end. So let's hit play and give this one another go. So let's hope this all works correctly now. We have mounts, we're mounting the horse, all great. And we're unmounting the horse as well. And yeah, that's it. Now, as you can see, the mounting looks really clean. I wouldn't even adjust any of these animations. I'm actually quite happy with that. But unmounting could use a tiny bit of work. It's good, but it's not, I would say, perfect. And we are going to address how to use HAP Pro to tweak animations to better fit our style anyway in later episodes. So unmounting could be one of those that we'll have a look at. But yeah, mounting looks really clean actually. There's not much we have to do there. It's just unmounting that could use a tiny bit of work, so it's not entirely perfect, but I'm honestly quite happy with this result. I'm actually quite happy with how all of this played out. And as you can see right now, we can only mount on the right side and we're standing on the left and we're not mounting. If you want to have mounting on the left side as well, literally just copy over that box and copy over these actions as well, because you would have to use a different animation set for this as well, because you're no longer mounting from the right. So that's something to keep in mind. But anyway, hope you enjoyed this. We are definitely going to look at expanding these actions, so how to actually whistle to, get our horse like it's done in so many games. We could even have a look at if we can have our horse spawn so that he's not visible in the scene, and we could have him spawn by whistling. And combat while mounted is something that could be interesting to look at as well. But that's it for now. Horse riding completely functional and working, and it's looking pretty good, I'd say. So hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.